Welcome back. So welcome to episode 4. So today we're going to be really talking about how do we integrate these ideas of central messages. Once we move beyond the absorption by feeling, how does that message take root? How does it anchor? And what does it become, right? That's what we're going to talk about today. You don't want to miss it. Go get your paper, get a cup of coffee, get some water, and meet me here. Welcome back. Welcome to episode 4. We have been dialed into this conversation about core messages. So if you've been with me from the beginning, you know we began by defining what a core message is. We talked about the weight it carries, how it's conveyed, how it's absorbed, how we come into the felt sense of what that message is, even if it's not factual, even if it's not actual, even if it's not accurate, right? We talked about all of that. We talked about the source. Where do these messages come from? Everywhere. Now, you can almost argue that because we're inundated with messages, you have to kind of, maybe see why certain messages make it past the gate, right? Why certain messages are somewhat integrated and others are not. There's a host of reasons. But based on your unique sense of self, based on the environment, based on the experience, based on your development, based on your culture, all of that has a lot to do with how you uptake the message, right? So just imagine, out of all the potential messages that you have given any weight to, which ones actually shaped you? Which ones did you actually integrate? And that's what I want to talk about today. So when I think about integration, maybe what's fair to say about this idea of absorbing messages and the felt sense of all of that is it's important for you to know that they become the internal script of our world. So if you ever were in any sort of performance, right? Maybe you did theater in school or whatever the case, you learned a script, didn't you? And while you were on the stage, your job was to live the reality of the character of the script. You were supposed to embody the emotion. You were supposed to, deliver the messaging accurate and just right. Well, guess what? It's not any different. So what happens to these messages is, remember we talked about the amplification of the message last time? We talked about how it happens that when those things are recurring or they're confirmed, we amplify that message, that felt tone, right? And as a result, that message stands a greater chance of moving past a conscious recognition that is going to be integrated as a part of my script. Which means, like any other script, I'm going to operate according to the script. I'm going to move to feature the character. I'm going to move in response to those inner voices that were once external voices. So what do I mean by that? What happens is when we hear a message, maybe from a particular person who has a lot of weight in our life, maybe we've heard the same statement over, maybe there's been some sort of consensus around the message for us, maybe it's been a deep message of comparison. That message actually moves from an external data file to an internal library. So imagine that for a minute. So the message goes from a song that plays outside of me to a song that plays inside of me. And so it forms this kind of inner working of a library. And remember, most of what we know about ourselves comes from what somebody else pointed out, a story they told us about ourselves, an experience they had with us. Some kind of way that experience becomes the bedrock of my own self-knowing. So what happens in this particular part of the story is that external voice now moves inward. And what does it become? It becomes a script. It becomes self-talk. So there's a blurring of the line between the actual voice that originated the message, the implication and the absorption of the felt sense of the message. And I now move from something that was once a story about me to something that I believe is true for me. Listen to the difference. Imagine that. So the music that once played outside, the narration that once lived outside of you is now absorbed through feeling, and it becomes the inner script. It becomes your own self-talk. This is why in many instances you hear people say, well, it's not enough, right, to get away from the voice that is in some ways infringing upon our sense of self, the accuracy of who we are. It's great if we can get out of harm's way of those voices, but what if we can't? What if the internalization and the integration has already occurred so that now that self-talk is within me? Now, I would be one to say, if you ever stop and listen to your self-talk, if you just listen just a little while, there isn't anybody probably who would be allowed to say those things to you in your presence. But yet internally, that not only is allowable, it is permitted. It is accepted. I want you to consider that. I want you to consider how somebody else's estimation of you, opinion of you, public opinion of you, idea of you, expectation of you, judgment of you. Remember, it doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't have to be true of you. I want you to see how that external voice became an internal script and the library is formed. And as a result, it moves from somebody else speaking it to now it is self-talk. It is in my own voice. What happens when it becomes something I hear within myself is I have no way to differentiate it from me, right? Because now it's my voice that's saying it. I am the one saying I am not enough. I am the one saying I am not lovable. I am the one saying I am not smart. I am the one saying I can't get the job. So it doesn't matter what happened out there. And most people would never think that most of the self-talk, again, goes unchecked, unchallenged, right? And we really don't want anybody to know that internal dialogue that goes on. But here's the thing I think I want you to hear. There's no way to hide it. Like, just because they can't hear it doesn't mean they can't see it. Just because they can't hear what you're saying to yourself doesn't mean it's not visible. Think about it. Have you ever watched somebody's demeanor? You watch them walk in the room and instantly you know if they're confident. Instantly you know, right? Now, how do you know? Because it's in their embodiment, right? It's in the internal sense of self. It's in their self-awareness. It's in their gait. It's in their movement. It's in their how they're walking across. It's in their embodiment. The message is absolutely fulfilled. It is internal. It is lodged. It is locked on. So the way you know is because everything about them is giving away the message. Now, they actually think that's a private message. They actually think nobody knows that I'm feeling insecure. Nobody knows I don't think really high of myself. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But that's not true because it's visible. It's palpable. It's tangible. I want you to understand that that self-talk that we work really hard to make sure nobody knows, how devastating, how demoralizing, how self-sabotaging it is, those words have life, which means even if they're not spoken out loud, they are visible, they are audible, they are loud, they are embodied in our actions, they're embodied in our temperament, they're embodied in the way we walk, how we carry ourselves, how we present ourselves. Remember I said, maybe this was in episode 1 of series 1, I said the thing about authenticity that people don't get is you cannot be authentic as someone other than yourself. You can't be authentic as an imposter. You can't be authentic carrying messages that are not accurate. You can't be authentic if you've assumed an identity that is not yours. And we think authenticity means I feel comfortable in my skin. It's much bigger than that. It means my presence is congruent with who I am. Listen to the difference. Authenticity means my presence is congruent with who I am. There is no civil war in here. I am congruent. I am aligned. I am sure of who I am. I am not in question. I am not in need of anybody's affirmation or confirmation. So when you think about authenticity, you cannot be authentic if you don't know who you are. So the ability to be authentic means to have such a sense of knowing and to live in such a state of alignment, such a state of awareness, such a state of clarity, unapologetically. So we'd like to think we're authentic, right? But you can't be authentic if you don't know who you are. You can't present yourself as someone other than yourself and call that authentic. Okay, so I want you to consider how these scripts became internal narrators, which explains what? It explains why you can have the exact same scenario, but you change jobs. You got a totally different boss. You got a whole new crew. You got a brand new team, but you have the same experience. How is that possible? It is possible because you are the common denominator and the script is running in the background Like a program on the computer. It's running in the background. It's driving everything. So much so that you're having a repeat occurrence and you're looking at everybody else as though they are somehow the fault line of what is going on. That experience is coming directly from you. So I want you to consider, this is why sometimes we can have a new year and not a new us. We can have a new year and old things still happen. Why? Because I am the bedrock and the blueprint of my behavior. And I cannot alter my behavior without altering my sense of self. And if I can't alter my sense of self, I cannot get another outcome. So I want you to consider this idea of the absorption of the message, the internalization of the self-talk, the blurring of the lines between what they said. Now, that's what I say. And I no longer know that I've taken up the cause, and it's my voice that carries the message that I hated. It's my voice that carries the message I loathed. It's my voice that carries the message I didn't want to hear. How does that happen? Right? Because remember, it's not about the message. It's about the felt sense. It's about how the message made me feel. So I want you to consider that once this takes hold in this way, and we have this library of dialogue and these scripts we play, that's why when you're with your peer group, you act a certain way. When you're at work and you work with your professional group, you act a different way. Why? This is a different script, right? Different script for work, different script for home, different script for peers, but nonetheless, all forged the same way. All forged the same way. So what happens when you and I lock in this way, and that script becomes a self-talk, the said now becomes what I see, the said now becomes what I say. Now what happens is my mind, my brain, this amazing apparatus, right, that is our neurological network. What we know about that is something we call, when these neural networks forge and they form these beautiful threads, look at it like roots under the ground. That's what these neurological networks look like. So the greater the belief, the conviction, the recurring confirmations, the affirmations, the assumptions, those networks grow very thick. They grow very weaved together, right? They're intricate, but they are stationed as scaffolding in a certain way. And as a result, that becomes who we believe we are. It's the domination of all things us, right? So now the mind takes over and we're only looking for what is familiar, what is assumed true. We're looking for what is what I believe at the core of my being, right? So now I have this neurological makeup that supports what they said. So now not only did the script originate outside, and not only did it move on the inside, now the writing is in my neurological network. So now the neurology supports what you said I am, which still may not be true. So the beautiful thing about something we call neuroplasticity, which is the hope of this entire dialogue, is that our brain, our entire neurological network, has the capacity to change, to transform, which is such good news because that means you and I are not stuck in old neurological patterns. It means there's a way out of the mess. It means we can rewrite the system. It means we can rewire the network. Because if we can wire it once, we can wire it again, which is again what the message to Esther was. Can you rewrite the story? Can you rewire the neurological network? You absolutely can. And that's what we're talking about, right? So what happens in this idea of neuroplasticity is you can change both the structure and the function of your mind, of your brain. You can change the structure and the function, which means how it is isn't the way it has to be. Isn't that good news? How it is not the way it has to be. Even the Bible says, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by what? The renewing of your mind. It might as well have said through the rewiring, the remapping, this entire ability to rewire the neurological system that is spitting out the same output. You and I have a chance. We have a unique opportunity here because when you know better, guess what we get to do? We get to do better. When we understand, understanding is pivotal because when you understand, you can make different choices. You can make different decisions. You can have a different experience, but you have to understand. So there's nothing more important, not than information. There's nothing more important than understanding. I need you to understand how the messages got here, how we absorb them, how we integrate them. I need you to see all that, how we interpret them. But now I need you to understand this isn't our final destination. We have a lot to say about how we move from here. So I want you to stay tuned. I want you to make sure you are joining me, but I want to give you a quick assignment before we go, but I want to make sure you will not miss episode 5, because we're going to really begin to talk about how this self-talk, this script, if you would, this internal narrator that is running everything behind the scenes, so much so that it's unconscious. I don't even recognize it anymore. Where the lines blurred and now what you said about me is now what I say about me. The said is now what I see, right? I want you to begin to see how this shapes your idea of you. We're going to be talking in the next episode about how that knowledge became self-knowledge, how the external source of the story became your source of self-knowledge, how a story told you who you were, how somebody's opinion dictated your self-knowledge. I want you to understand that when we understand what affects our self-knowledge, we can understand what affects our self-image. When we know what affects our self-image, we know how to change our self-appraisal and our ability to see our self-worth. So we're going to be talking about in the next episode how our identity is shaped by this narrative, by this knowledge that's secondhand at best, maybe not even true, absolutely unchallenged, inaccurate. But we're going to be talking about how that becomes the bedrock of my self-knowledge and how that self-knowledge bleeds into my self-image and affects my self-esteem, right? So you won't want to miss it. Join me for episode 5, but let's talk about what I want you to do between now and then. I want you to consider your self-talk. Maybe for 5 minutes, I want you to allow yourself to become absolutely aware of the language, the vocabulary, the tones, how you talk to yourself, and more importantly, what you say to yourself. I want you to listen in. I want to see if you can identify maybe that's not your voice. I want you to see if you can identify, man, that was never me. And I want you to begin to see that if that voice didn't originate in you, perhaps there's a better source file for us to drive a place of self-talk from. Suppose we should look at what is sacred, what is spiritual, what is sound, so that we can build a bedrock for our identity that doesn't waver, that isn't vulnerable, that isn't waiting on somebody else's confirmation, that doesn't worry about judgment or rejection, something that is steeped in something unmovable, something unchanging, something that already has value, and that value cannot be tarnished or disposed of. That's where we're going. So I want you to just listen in, pay attention, become openly self-aware, and see if you can hear that talk and see if you can identify its source. But more importantly, I want you to begin to see that script is not you. Even though you're so familiar with it that now it just sounds like you, sounds like you're talking about you, it's still not true. And it's still not you. That's what we're going to talk about. So listen, thank you so much for joining me. I am enjoying hanging out with you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for doing the work in between and actually listening in to see what you are saying about you that didn't originate in you. All right. I'm going to see you in episode 5. You won't want to miss it. I'm Dr. Veronica. I'll see you soon.